This is Detroit's Morning Answer with John Anthony on FM 92.7 and AM 1400. The Answer.
Good morning, Detroit. Detroit's Morning Answer with John Anthony. If you missed that first hour, head over to theanswerdetroit.com. That's theanswerdetroit.com. Download the podcast. You can listen to this show no matter where you are. And you can also go follow us at YouTube at Detroit's Morning Answer. Paul puts up all of the interviews. We haven't put the whole show on. We're going to do that once we start streaming. But Paul puts up the interviews of all of the people. So I know I get a lot of text messages. Hey, man, I want to hear that interview again. Head over to Detroit's Morning Answer on YouTube. You know, today we're going to be joined by Keith Gross. Keith is an analyst, a pilot, a former assistant state attorney, and a prosecutor for the state of Florida. And he also served in the Montana National Guard. He's going to have to explain Florida, Montana. Montana is a place, man. That's one of 3 states I've never been to in the United States of America. Alaska, Montana, and 4. Alaska, Montana, Hawaii, and Alaska. He's going to have to explain that, though. His new book, Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation, tells his story of building the American dream from the ground up, and more importantly, what it will take to preserve that dream for those coming behind us. Reagan's quote. Keith has been outspoken about securing the southern border, strengthening American citizenship, and protecting the meaning of what it means to be an American. President Trump has brought birthright citizenship back to the front of the national conversation, and Keith has unique legal and constitutional insight on what comes next. Keith, welcome to the show.
To be with you.
You know, before we get into all that, I really do want to plug your book early. What moved you to write it now, and what do you want Americans to feel when they close that last page?
Well, the book's really sort of a bio of growing up in small-town America in North Florida and the small-town wisdom that was imparted to me by the folks that raised me. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot, but they had common sense, and I see a lack of that in today's world.
Oh, my God, man. If we had more people with common sense, what this world would look like. We don't all have to agree, but just common sense is a fleeting thing here in our country. But I'm so glad that you did write that book. But let's talk about this, because I have been discussing this birthright citizenship for a very long time, even on my Saturday show, Black and Right. Now, Keith, when the 14th Amendment was written, the lawmakers who drafted, one of them was Senator Howard from right here in Michigan. The lawmakers who drafted made it clear that citizenship was tied to allegiance and jurisdiction. Can you walk us through the original intent of that language?
Sure. So obviously, the 14th Amendment was intended to convey citizenship only on those who owed allegiance solely to America. And that's why they included the part of the phrase there that says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So it says, you're a citizen if you're born here and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, the problem with that phrase in modern language is that we've come to know on lay terms that subject to the jurisdiction, to most people, you just pull somebody off the street, that just means that, well, you're here, so you're subject to the jurisdiction here. But that was not the meaning at the time of the drafting. When they used those words then, it meant you're here with the consent of our government and that you have voluntarily subjected yourself solely to the jurisdiction of this government.
Wow. So how do I put this? So there's a distinction between citizenship by birth and citizenship by soil. How has that distinction been lost or misinterpreted in the last century?
Well, in many ways, they've overlapped and become one and the same. The one real key distinction that's been lost is consent of the sovereign. And there's a case that interpreted the 14th Amendment that I'm sure is going to come back into play as the birthright citizenship cases make their way through the courts. That case was called Kim Wong Ark. And it goes into great description about consent of the sovereign, which historically meant consent of the king to be in his kingdom. But in the context of America, it means consent of the federal government to be in America. And they walk through the details of how the 14th Amendment would not convey citizenship to the children of a ambassador who lives at the embassy. While they are here, they're not consenting to the jurisdiction of our government.
Right.
Yes, they are technically here and under the jurisdiction, but not really, not from a legal perspective. They talked about in that case how the children of an invading army, for example, would not be conferred citizenship merely because they were born while they were on our soil, because they were not here with the consent of our government. And so it's easy enough to draw the line and see why legal scholars can expect that courts will agree with the Trump administration that children of illegal immigrants who are not here with the consent of our government similarly should not be granted citizenship.
Now, we know this came up during the this last Republican presidential cycle, because Nikki Haley's parents are not American citizens, but she was born here in America, and yet they still allow her to run. Why was that allowed?
There's been a misinterpretation by the executive branch for decades and decades now of the 14th Amendment. Congress writes the laws, and obviously we've had amendments to our Constitution, but ultimately where the rubber hits the road is the executive branch. And so if the executive branch gets it wrong, we're all stuck with those results. The fact is, executive branches in the past have been lazy with interpretation to the birthright citizenship clause, and they've just said, let's not get into the details. If they're born here, just give it to everybody. And that's what's happened for decades now. And fortunately, President Trump is putting on his originalist hat when interpreting the Constitution and is striving to comply with what it originally meant, not what some layperson might think it was supposed to mean today, but what it really means.
Now, you see, the makeup of the court. There's six pretty much originalists, and then there you have three very progressive. The Constitution is a living, breathing document. I know it's going to be they're going to judge this case this year. What do you think is going to be the outcome? Are you think they're going to be? Are you think they're going to be concerned about pressures, the street pressures, because that's what some of the things as far as the election of 2020 they were concerned. I personally believe they were concerned about what the reaction would be. You think that's going to be part in play as it relates to this case?
Well, the unfortunate reality is that judges are human, and we can't expect them to check their humanity at the door when they put that robe on. That said, we do have an expectation that they uphold the law without bias, that they interpret the Constitution as it was originally drafted. And that's what I expect will ultimately happen. They may soften their language a little bit to try to, manage perceptions, but ultimately I think we'll see a 6-3 decision upholding the original interpretation of the 14th Amendment. If anything, they will likely narrow that decision to exclude any stripping of citizenship from those that were born in America prior to that date. They're going to say there's a reliance interest, so we can't go back and tell someone who thinks they're an American citizen who's relied on that perhaps for decades that they're not all of a sudden an American citizen. I don't think they're going to do that.
But isn't that one of the drivers for this illegal immigration? Knowing that if you make it to America, especially that's why a lot of the cartels, a lot of the gangs, they send their pregnant girlfriends, wives to cross the border, knowing that if they make it to America and they give birth, that their kids will have automatic citizenship. Isn't that one of the drivers?
Absolutely. It's a huge driver for people to come here knowing that their child will be a U.S. citizen if they're born here under the current incorrect interpretation of the law, and that may allow them in the future to claim some benefit, attempt to stay, or otherwise get a U.S. taxpayer benefit. But what's more alarming is not that people from our neighbor to the south, Mexico, or other countries right there, those people, of course, they're immigrating in large numbers and having a lot of anchor babies. But the more alarming thing is when people from places like China or Russia, they make a tourist trip just at the time they're about to have a child so that child is born in the U.S. and is able to have both citizenship. Now, fast forward 30 years, you're going to have a lot of people who were raised in China but can show up at a military recruiting center with a U.S. passport and apply for a security clearance. That should worry people.
Keith Gross, I'm not going to lie. That's been one of the things that has concerned me. How President Trump visits a lot of these military bases. I mean, some of those guys that are on these bases or on the ships, they have weapons with them. People have said that I'm crazy for thinking this, but what would cause one of these enemies of America to put somebody on and President Trump's on one of these bases, and they unload on him.
It's definitely a concern. I mean, obviously, most of the time when you're on base, you don't necessarily have ammo in your rifle right then, unless you're going to go to an event where you'll be firing that rifle. Most of the time, it's only people who are in a QRF or law enforcement capacity that would be, or officers. I suppose there are plenty of officers that would be armed with ammo routinely. But most rank and file service members don't carry around ammo while they're on post.
Yeah. Now, critics are arguing that changing birthright citizenship is somehow anti-immigrant or anti-Latino. How do you respond to that framing?
Well, I don't think it's anti-anything. I think it's about upholding the Constitution, and people who may be missing out on taxpayer benefits, I'm sure, are going to cry about it. But the reality is none of that matters. Feelings don't matter. The Constitution says what it says, and it doesn't say what it doesn't say. It's our job as Americans to uphold that Constitution, not try to pretend it says something else.
Well, when you have elected officials like AOC saying ignore Supreme Court rulings, I mean, the Constitution be damned. I mean, when we're having leaders, I mean, Mandami just won in New York. He'll be the next mayor of New York. I have a sense that these people really don't care anything about the Constitution of the United States of America. I mean, especially not the constitutions of the states. If we're having people elected, I wrote something down. I said, it used to be that immigrants came to America for a better life, but now they want a better life, but they're bringing the problems of their country to our shores. They want a better life in America, but they also, especially someone like Mandami, where totalitarianism and communism, and he's a proud Democrat socialist. If we continue to elect these type of people, how will that affect the America's ability to maintain and enforce the Constitution of the United States?
Well, enforcing our Constitution is built into American culture, but immigration is diluting American culture at a rate never seen before. It's pretty natural that someone coming from another nation will have their paradigms stick with them while they move to America. The difference in our history is that in prior years, we didn't allow such a large number of immigrants to come in, such that it was impossible for them to assimilate and possible for them to outvote Americans at the ballot box. And that's what we just saw in New York.
Yeah.
We saw foreign-born citizens outvoting Americans. The replacement is real. It just happened. And unless we start really reanalyzing how many immigrants we allow to come into this nation, we're never going to be able to solve the problem, because there's a lot more people outside America than inside. And if we let billions of people immigrate freely, American culture's over.
Yeah. I forget the first name of this young lady, but I think her last name is Sarsour. And she's talking about what happens after the election and what she's going to reveal. I want you to hear this, and I want to get your take.
Right now, I'm a little more quiet because I'm on the quiet side of this race. But I'm going to tell you that once November 4th comes around, I will tell the story. The story is not just that it's random that Zahran ascended to this place. It is our Muslim American communities. And I'll also say that it's Muslim money. The PACs that have supported Zahran, or a particular PAC that has supported Zahran, is probably over 80% of Muslim American donors in this country.
Keith Grove, if I'm Pam Bondi, I'm opening up an investigation. I'm getting the FBI to look over this funding to see where this money came from. Is that a fair thing to do?
Sure, definitely. We should always be looking at money when it gets involved in politics. There's tons of opportunities for fraud there. We saw it with Act Blue and Democrats getting tons of donations from what appear to be foreign donors under fake names. And this has been a growing problem for a long time. But no matter where the money came from, it's clear where the votes came from. Mm-hmm. The votes came from foreign-born citizens, and that's because we allowed too many foreign people to immigrate to the U.S. legally and illegally. We need to stop both and really reassess how many immigrants America needs right now, because if you let a small number of immigrants in, they will assimilate into American culture and become part of our lives. If you let a massive number of immigrants in, they try to build their country here.
Yeah, Dirt Roads to Runways is about more than policy. It's about identity, hope, and what America can still be. What do you say to young Americans who feel the country is being lost right out in front of them?
Well, they're right. The country is being lost right in front of us. And if we don't stand up and act there will be no turning back. There's nowhere else to run. America is the last place, and it's our job to preserve it, not only for ourselves, but for the next generation. So you don't have to get involved in politics, but you better, because politics will be involved with you whether you want it to be or not. So stand up, get involved, run for office, vote, educate your friends, do what you need to do, but don't stand on the sidelines.
Keith Gross, what gives you hope that the American dream can still be defended?
Well, I see a lot of people out there who understand the value of capitalism. They understand that socialism doesn't create anything. It just redistributes what others have created. I see a massive shift to the right in young men at university levels. That was obviously pushed in large part by Charlie Kirk and the Turning Point movement. And I see people standing up and picking up the microphone and continuing that message. Let's hope more continue to do it, because it's the only way we save this American dream.
Keith, where can listeners get your book, Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation? And where can they follow your work?
You can follow me online at any social media at Keith Gross FL. You can sign up for the newsletter at keithgross.com. The book is available at amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold, and it's an audiobook on Audible.
Keith Gross, I'm definitely going to make sure Riley instills you into our rotation, because I feel in the coming months and years, especially with the midterm coming up, we're going to need your analysis on a lot of the issues that I think that is going to be before the American people, and they need to hear from somebody who truly understands what it means to defend the greatest nation ever created, America. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's Keith Gross. Go get his book, Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. He does have a story to tell. We'll be right back.